It's often been observed that young men are willing to adapt to a changing landscape in order to adjust to a world that never remains the same, while old men waste what little time and strength they thought they had trying to force the world to remain the way that it was. And so we come to the curious case of Jerry the Jackass Jones. The owner of the Dallas Cowboys, though the way things are looking, he may well find himself very soon being the former owner of the Dallas Cowboys. I've been telling you for weeks, amounting to months, that the NFL's protest by the players was in fact going to eventually fade from the headlines. It would have to, because after all, even if every player out there decided to take a knee, at some point the cameras are not going to be on them. And besides, it's not like they have stopped playing the game. In fact, I couldn't help but notice that injuries, bad injuries, seem to be up this season. I guess the players are kind of making up for their protest by beating the living hell out of each other. No accounting for taste. But Jerry Jones has been an on-again, off-again supporter of the protest, mostly off again. For a hot minute, it looked like Jerry Jones couldn't decide what side of history he wanted to stand on. Well, apparently he's made up his mind and he's going to stand on the wrong side of history. Now, the reason this is happening is because there has been some kvetching and bitching and whining from white fans and ticket holders, the usual suspects. They're doing all their complaining and griping. In other words, they're being themselves. This has been echoed and amplified somewhat by the right-wing hate media, specifically right-wing hate radio. These guys who have created their own little bubble where all they hear is what they want to hear and all they see is whatever pleases them, and they can engage in all manner of racist code words. This is what happens when you decide that you're going to get your support from Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity. What you find very quickly is, as Lindsey Graham beautifully put it, we're not creating enough angry white males to stay in power. And so Jerry Jones is finding out the hard way. The guys who own NFL teams these days, by and large, a lot of them are not necessarily part of Jerry Jones's age cohort, at least not for the biggest part. There are a lot of younger guys in there. But more importantly than that, there are a lot of guys who understand that the country is changing, and indeed the world is changing. And as astute businessmen, they understand when you need to be prepared to die on a hill and when you need to seem, or at least to try to appear, as if you're making some sort of change when in fact you're changing nothing at all. The NFL understands that any effort at trying to suppress the protest would be more trouble than it's worth. As I pointed out, they've been through this before. This is not the first time they've done something that fans didn't like, and it's not going to be the last time. So what you do is you keep on delivering the goods until things get back to normal, until the fans who are bitching and whining get over their childish petulance, and we get back to business as usual. But Jerry Jones has decided that he wants to be the darling of the right wing. I suppose that's what happens when you live in Texas. You somehow imagine yourself to be something that you're not. The NFL commissioner, Roger Goodell, is talking about getting a contract extension, and Jerry Jones wants to figure out if there's a way that he can block it or otherwise derail it because he's trying to appeal to the Fox News crowd. Talk about a clown who doesn't know who his audience is. I don't know what Jerry Jones was thinking. Perhaps as an old white guy, he thought that surely the owners would get behind him, and it would be a simple matter to out Roger Goodell, and that would simply be the end of that. But that's not what happened. Instead, exactly the opposite has happened. Now the team owners are talking about, what do we got to do to get rid of Jerry Jones? He has found himself isolated and under threat, as well he should. It's come to light recently that Papa John's, the would-be pizza chain, I went to a Papa John's once, and let me tell you something. That was some of the worst, salty, over-spiced, and basically it wasn't even pizza. It was butter with a couple of pizza pieces in it. That's what it was. Just terrible stuff. About what you expect from a bunch of rednecks who got their hands on some kitchen ingredients with no adult supervision. But Jerry Jones apparently owns a few Papa John's. Quite a few. In fact, he's got over 100 reportedly Papa John's franchises that he himself owns. So when Papa John's owner decided that he was going to bitch and complain about the NFL protest, it didn't take long for people to follow up with the money and very quickly figure out that, perhaps the wrinkled, stubby hand of Jerry Jones was behind it, and indeed it seems to be the case. He tried to get a proxy out there to sling the mud for him, and that didn't work too well. People saw right through the con. And in the end, he was forced to get out there and do his dirty work himself. I guess he figured that being a white man was enough. See, this is what happens when a demented, degenerate mentality, a demented, degenerate ideology reaches the end of the line. White supremacy started off with a perverted yet powerful idea taking hold. And in the end, the only idea they've got left is to try to hold on to power, which is usually the biggest mistake that you make when things are changing. The landscape is changing. You don't try to hold power in a death's grip. Power is like the ocean during a storm. You cannot make the ocean do what you want it to do. What you must do instead is to adjust to it so that you can ride the surf and hopefully use the power of nature to your advantage. Now, as much as I hate to give the white supremacists any credit, for at least half a millennium, they correctly interpreted what they were seeing, more or less. And the men who own the NFL, they seem to be doing the same thing now. You got to give the devil his due if you intend to one day run him out of hell. The team owners are not about to waste their time and their energy attempting to antagonize the players. They understand that this is a momentary blip on the map. It happens to be just one of the many hurdles that they have to get over as part of being part of an international globe-spanning sports juggernaut. But Jerry Jones, on the other hand, apparently seems to think that he's running a sports plantation. He does not see himself as merely the owner of a team franchise with athletes who he's depending on to bring in the goods. Apparently, he thinks of himself as being the master, and that he cracks the whip, and the good little niggers better get in line or else. He's finding out the hard way that perhaps the $40 million slaves are not so easily cowed, at least on this point, not so easily cowed after all. And for those of you still whining and complaining and sounding like a bunch of 3-year-olds who just discovered a new word and say, well, these players, they only started to protest because Donald Trump said something, Donald Trump. While I would never ascribe black pride to major pro sports athletes, you also cannot deny the fact that they have maintained their protests. Many of them have. Now, some of them have not, and I told you this was going to happen. But many of them have continued their protest regardless. So you need to give credit where it's due and see this as it truly is. It won't last forever, nor should it. I mean, the NFL players are not legislators. They don't have the ability to change any laws. They don't have the ability to go after any crooked cops. They don't have the ability to go after any DAs for prosecutorial misconduct or malicious prosecution. They don't have the ability to do that. All they can do is make a statement. As I said and will continue to say, the NFL players are not telling you to stand with them. They're protesting in order to show that they stand with you. You're supposed to be doing the heavy lifting. The NFL protest only went on for one game. That's still, I would not blame them for stopping. And I certainly don't blame them if they all decide, okay, we've made our point at this juncture. You're supposed to be the one doing the heavy lifting, not them. After all, what do you expect? Them to be taking a knee and somehow that's supposed to bring Darren Wilson to justice? Betty Shelby is going to be brought to justice because the players are taking a knee? No. Perhaps Jerry Jones isn't the only one who has severely misunderstood the landscape that he finds himself in. But I do get a nice little thrill out of watching as Jerry Jones would be throwing his white weight around and blown up in his face. And a lot of his would-be supporters can't understand it. This is just to them the most shocking thing ever because they are counting on white people getting on code. That's what they were expecting. That's what the game plan was. Jerry Jones goes ahead and he sends the signal. He steps over the line that gives everybody the initiative that, okay, this is the direction we're going in. Time to get on code. White power, And instead, what happened was the other team owners, white in the main, decided, nah, Jerry, maybe you're the problem who needs to go. They want this to go away. They want it to fade from the headlines. And they understand that the team owners understand that they've got the advantage. Once the networks decided that they were no longer going to be actually broadcasting the players taking the knee, that largely gets it out of sight, out of mind. If you ignore it, this thing will largely fade away. Sure, people will talk about it, but it becomes background noise. You can get back to setting up the next Super Bowl. But Jerry Jones is on his little crusade. He's a white man. As far as he's concerned, these Negroes need to understand they're out of line because today they're taking a knee. Tomorrow they'll be demanding more money. So we got to get this in the bud now. Get these Negroes back in place now. Put them in their place. At least that's what he thought. This is what happens when you decide that you're going to live in the bubble of right-wing fantasy land. When you spend all day listening to one radio station or you got the television permanently glued to false news. What you wind up doing is you wind up taking part in a bubble that's been furnished with all sorts of ridiculous racialist media fantasies. You convince yourself that you got the power that you really don't. You overplay your hand and overextend. And what a surprise, the right-wing nuts who used to be talking about the ratings of the NFL, as I told you, the ratings rebounded. What a surprise. And they don't have anything else to say other than, well, we stand for the flag around here. Yeah, but your problem is you couldn't get the black players to do it. That's the problem. And what have they been reduced to? What they've been reduced to instead is saying, well, in our day, we respect the flag. Yeah, you couldn't even drag out the old saw about the NFL ratings. That ran its course, as I told you that it would. And now what's happened is they are on the verge of panic to hear their commentary these days. When they see the NFL owners who are saying Jerry Jones, who the right wing have been applauding and congratulating him, yeah, Jerry Jones is standing up to these un-American, support the troops. Yeah, that's their talking point. That everyone recognizes that for the lie that it is. They tried to put out a false narrative. They were trying to cover up their racism behind patriotic rhetoric, and it didn't work. The players outlasted them. And there's a lesson in that for black people. If you have somebody who is trying to figure out how to throw up a rhetorical smokescreen, the way that you defeat them is you do not stop pushing your message. Message discipline is more than merely staying on topic. It is also repeating and repeating and repeating something until that becomes the narrative. That's how it works. And the NFL players have done so brilliantly. Because the longer it goes on, people eventually, even the idiots who are trying to say it's about patriotism, everybody goes, well, this is about the police and the justice system. Yeah, that narrative will win out if they are persistent, and they have been. But the right-wing nuts just can't understand
what's up?
Jerry Jones has been isolated.
Huh?
That's because this is what happens when you got a bunch of idiots who don't own an NFL team and clearly don't know who the NFL's audience is. The owners of the teams, the NFL owners who have isolated Jerry Jones, they know exactly who their audience is, just like Hollywood does. It's the right-wing nuts who apparently don't know who their audience is. Fox News' viewership is shrinking by the day. Their key demo, the 50 to dead demo, is dying out. Even Steve Bannon pointed that out. Fox News is your father or your grandfather's right-wing hate outlet. We need something that's going to appeal to younger people so we can bring in more hate mongers. And if Steve Bannon tells you that Fox News is burning out, you might want to listen to him because this guy seems to have the pulse of what the white supremacists are really trying to do. And he doesn't seem to be lacking for support. So the right-wing media is becoming old and stale and staid. They're so busy repeating the same old mantras, sticking to the same old formula of hate, the same old formula of rhetoric, telling themselves that they're winning when, truth be told, they're in a holding pattern. You know who these right-wing nuts really remind me of? And I guess it's because I'm old enough to remember. They remind me of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was still talking the claptrap about communism or socialism becoming the world standard all the way up until the fall of the Berlin Wall. They were still talking about true communism in our time all the way up until the Berlin Wall was brought down. They were still talking it. Hell, some of them were talking it after the Berlin Wall fell. It was Prime Minister Yeltsin who had to launch an assault on the Russian Federation Congress in order to get rid of the last of the Soviet hardliners. And this after the fall of communism. It's because there were just some clowns who simply couldn't let it go. They had spent so long hearing their own rhetoric, so long repeating their own slogans and talking points, so long just endlessly reminding themselves how brilliant they thought that they were. They just formed this mutual admiration society, this circle of people patting themselves on the back for how smart they thought they were and how clever they thought their ideology was, that when reality unkindly intruded on their self-reverential fantasy, they simply couldn't believe it. They refused to believe it. See, in the real world, you have to understand that you're not always going to be winning, as Charlie Sheen likes to say. Circumstances will change. The landscape will change. The metamorphosis of the environment is the only constant. Nothing stays the same. Now, those people who understand that reality and make the adjustments, they're the ones who tend to stay on top. Because the truth of the matter is, anything that is so hard and so rigid that it cannot bend is also so hard and rigid that it will shatter as the ground beneath it moves, because nothing is more powerful than the ground that you stand on. The ground that you stand on is where you get your food from. The ground that you stand on is where you build your home. The ground that you stand on is how you get around. If that ground remains stable, you're fine. But when it starts moving, ain't nothing you can do except for hope that it stops moving before it tears you apart. You have to stand in appropriate humility of this reality. This is how the world is. Now, businessmen who plan for the long haul, the ones who understand that, they thrive. The rest of them, well, they try to impress some right-wing nutbags on Fox News or on the radio. These white supremacist AM types, Aryan meatheads is what AM ought to stand for. And that's who you're going to impress, because apparently this is who you think watches the NFL. Man, the NFL is all about merchandising. That's how the NFL makes their freaking money. Merchandising is where the money is made at. And who do they depend on for merchandising? You see, you can't just decide you're going to try to please one demographic and one only. That won't work. The NFL wishes to be a global brand. And in a world where white people are an ever-shrinking minority, 12% and falling, if that? In a world like that, you cannot decide that the only demographic that matters is white. That's setting yourself up to go out of business. Now, maybe Jerry Jones is so wedded to his white supremacist white ideology that apparently he's going to kill the golden goose. But the rest of these guys are looking and going, you know what? We still want to be in business 20 years from now, because Jerry Jones ain't even going to be alive 20 years from now. Hell, it's even odds that he'll be pushing up daisies in 10 years. Looking at the guy looks like a freaking crypt keeper. How the hell old is Jerry Jones again? I mean, will somebody please try to tell me how old he is? He's like 75, right? But to look at the guy, he looks 95. Oh, Jerry, the years have not been kind. And apparently, the patron saint of common sense wasn't very kind to him either. Yes, sir, Jerry Jones was definitely playing hooky when they were passing out brains. But I digress. The point that I'm trying to make with this video essay, just this little mini rant, if you will, is that we happen to have a lot of power as Black people if we're willing to use it and willing to be persistent. The bad guys are always going to try to threaten your pocketbook. They're always going to try to shame you and coerce you and hopefully let your imagination do the rest. But as Black people, the only times that we've won is when we stick to our guns. And I've been saying it for over a decade now. If we fight, we win. If we don't, we die. Do you want to defeat white supremacy? Then damn it, you gotta fight them. You're not going to have some good white savior come in on a white horse and save you. And you're not going to find some Black person who's going to be your champion. And this one Black person is going to defeat white supremacy for you either. That ain't happening either. There's a lot of ways that white supremacy could be brought to its knees and crushed out of existence, but a white savior or a lone Black hero who's going to do all the work for you, those two scenarios will never be it. The fall and the eradication of white supremacy depends upon one factor and one factor only. That is all of you. Ain't no one person going to do it. No small cadre of people are going to do it. White supremacy, racism is a group sport, and Black empowerment is also going to have to be a group sport. You're not going to sit on the sidelines and cheer somebody on. That's what Black folks have been doing for 100 years. We'll sit on the sidelines and we'll cheer on Marcus Garvey. We'll sit on the sidelines and we'll cheer on Malcolm X. We'll sit on the sidelines and we'll cheer on Medgar Evers and Martin Luther King and Huey Newton and whomever else. That don't work. It has never worked. It's okay to have somebody who's particularly noteworthy, but the point is you got to be out there with them, locking arms with them, letting them know we're all out here together. You didn't step over the line alone. You want to know why the NFL is having to capitulate? It's because the players stepped across that line as a team. They did it as a group. When Colin Kaepernick was out there, they got rid of him real easy. Didn't take them long to chew him up and spit him out. And they didn't have to apologize for it, didn't have to give 1 inch on it. But now that all the players are out there as a group, stepping across that line together, now look at it. The NFL, who's winning this league? Ain't that what False News is up there saying, Steve Ducey and the rest of the Klansmen on there? Who the hell's running the NFL? Seems like the niggers are running it. Damn right. You're damn right the Black men are running it. And they're running it right. They're the ones who have to get out there and have the concussions and the broken bones. They're the ones who put themselves through the ringer so you can have $1 billion business. Damn right. He who generates the gold should be making the rules. But they ain't used to that. They're used to the plantation structure. Jerry Jones sits on the porch of the mansion, in the owner's box, and he gets to sip mint juleps while the brothers are out there in the field working themselves to death. That's what they're used to. Don't matter if it's the cotton fields or the football field. No, what's being shown here is this is what happens when Black men decide as a group that they are going to exercise the power of we. And there is no substitute for that. You're never going to find a way to get around that. Even if Colin Kaepernick was still in the league, one man could never have made this to happen. Now, this is what goes on in the NFL. You got a bunch of brothers out there who, even with their millions, they were timid for a long while, but apparently some of them have discovered their backbone. There's a few of us who could benefit from their example, There are a few of us who have been looking at one person and thinking maybe this one individual is going to do all the heavy lifting for me and I can just sit back and twiddle my thumbs or twiddle my toes and, I'll just cheer them on and tell them how great they are. That's not going to cut it, not by half. Defeating white supremacy, building the economic foundation and the edifice to go on top of it, establishing and building a real black media, all of these things are going to be group sports. All of these things are going to be reliant upon one crucial factor, and that is how many black people are willing to get out there and decide that they are going to help to push this boulder up the hill. One man can't do it. But we, as a group, it becomes easy. Just to make this a little personal, I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing here. First of all, it's necessary. Second of all, I enjoy it. I enjoy kicking white supremacy. I enjoy watching white supremacy cough up blood as I stomp on its throat. I get a thrill out of it. I get up every freaking morning just drooling at the mouth. White supremacy, where you at? Where you at? Damn right. Paul Mooney said that he said the N-word so much it made his teeth white. I say white supremacy so much it makes my teeth white. But what I also want to see is white supremacy catch hell morning, noon, and night. For black empowerment and the message that we represent to be so pervasive that it cannot be denied because it will not be ignored. That means we're going to have to, if I may use a sports metaphor, flood the zone. One person ain't going to be enough to do it. Cheering on your star player ain't going to be enough. Learn from the example that these brothers have set. Whatever you may think about them personally, we all have our reservations about them. And we all got our doubts and such. You can't deny the fact that they got out there, they stepped across the line, and they stuck to it. And now they got it where the team owners are understanding that they're not going to be able to stop this one. Jerry Jones went from being a would-be white knight of the far right to being an embattled good old boy who's now looking and going, damn, I could be gone long before Roger Goodell. And here's the thing, there is no lack of billionaire consortiums who would love to get their hands on the Dallas Cowboys. There's no lack of them at all. That's the lesson to be learned from the fall of Donald Sterling. Donald Sterling thought that he was indispensable. He thought that apparently they would never get him out of there. Man, as soon as they understood that he was under a fire, as soon as they saw that this guy, that there was blood in the water, Steve Ballmer and his friends came along and said, well, Donald, I guess we'll see you, at the next retreat in the Alps somewhere. Next time we all go to the south of France and hang out, we'll see you then. But in the meanwhile, your license to print money just became my license to print money. See, you can still be a racist white man, but the lesson to be learned is you better not let the black players catch you doing that mess, because the black players exercise veto power. That's what you have so many white people who are butthurt about. They cannot stand the fact that they're used to a world where black people get abused by white folks, and we just have to take it. Now they're watching, and on a global stage in front of the world, in front of the cameras, they're watching as white men whose tongues get out of line. You have the symbol of the comforting, cowed, docile, home-broken Negro, the black athlete, the domesticated Negro, who apparently has decided that he's going to bite the hand that claimed to feed him. These Negroes are looking and going, you know what? We're the ones who are feeding you. And that's the truth. Donald Sterling only got to eat because black men continue to feed him. And Jerry Jones only continues to eat because black men continue to feed him. But what they're showing is, the day we get tired of feeding you, we'll cut you off real quick. Yeah, you see, they're getting a little bit of taste of power. That's something white supremacy's always feared. You got to keep the Negroes intimidated, keep them cowed, keep them scared, because if they get the idea that they got some power, well, hell, they got 500 years of abuse to make up for. the bill's going to be due with hella interest. The bad guys get that. And if black men have the idea that they ain't got to take white people's abuse, that they can, in fact, not only dish it out, but more importantly than that, they can punish you for this behavior, that could become habit forming. And that's what they're afraid of. They need this NFL protest to go away, but it doesn't go away as long as Jerry Jones has decided that he's going to play Don Quixote tilting at windmills. As long as he decides that he's going to be fighting dragons that don't really exist. That's the thing that Jerry Jones has done. While he gets together with other rednecks like John Schnatter, the idiot who owns Papa John's, and who, by the way, is not even an NFL owner to the best of my knowledge. I don't think he owns a piece of any NFL team, and yet this idiot is sitting here talking about the NFL, and he's trying to find, I would imagine, his own excuse for Papa John's poor sales. It couldn't possibly be anything that he's done. I mean, he's just the guy who founded and runs the place, so surely it can't be anything that he's done. Yeah, it's a sorry workman who blames his tools, and is also a poor businessman who tries to blame some of his marketing affiliates for his own poor business acumen. No, I would imagine that Papa John's is in big trouble because any clown who has to blame the NFL for his own poor business skills, this is not somebody who should have been in business in the first place. And by the way, as Slate Magazine was reporting, the way that old Jerry Jones decided to go about things, calling himself, using Papa John's as a stalking horse for his own right-wing nuttery, that could well be in violation of part of the NFL team rules. It very well could be a violation of the NFL's constitution and bylaws. Because if he's done something deliberately, done something that would be detrimental to the welfare of the league or professional football, he could have to forfeit his team. Now, of course, this is Jerry Jones we're talking about, and the odds of what he's done actually resulting in him losing the Dallas Cowboys franchise or the owners ganging up on him, that's a remote possibility. Though some people would have said the same thing about Donald Sterling and the Clippers, too, by the way. There's no such thing as a king who is entitled to stay at the top of the mountain. There's no such thing as an irrevocable right to be at the top. You're not guaranteed that. You're not promised that. And yet Jerry Jones behaves as if apparently that he has some sort of divine right. I guess it was written on the stone tablets for Moses, the 11th commandment, Jerry Jones shall always be in charge. No, especially not for old men. Jerry Jones doesn't seem to have any sort of successor, and that makes sense. Jerry Jones has always been about himself, first and foremost. And truth be told, he wasn't even really that good. That's one of the Achilles heels of the NFL teams because of the fact that it's a license to print money. You're not really that important. What's important are the athletes you're able to get. Whether or not you got a coach whose system, quote unquote, the athletes are able to effectively exploit. There are many parts of an NFL team that are vital and important, but the problem is they're all on the field. The guy who's cutting the paychecks, or rather who is the recipient of the merchandising money that the players make possible, he is the least important person in the entire game. He is the least necessary, and yet he's the one who realizes the most income from it. For a good long while, the players seem to be willing to allow that to go on, but apparently some of them are saying, you know what, if you are going to be making all of this money off of us, then you're going to have to put up with the fact that we may not be able to get the big check like you get. We're rich, you're wealthy. But you know what, if we decide that we're going to call an audible or two, another football expression, then you better be real careful what you choose to say about it. It may be your franchise, but it's our league. And they are still the hottest thing in sports. They have the leverage now, and they're using it now. And I love watching as the individuals who have been so prideful and so sure of themselves are now in a situation where they either have to shut up altogether, or at the very least, they're having to try to figure out a way to put lipstick on this pig of a right-wing movement that they thought was going to get started in the NFL. They were just so sure it was going to work. Please give me a break. Jerry Jones is finding out the hard way that power moves. It is not static. It does not remain in one place forever. Power moves. And either you move with it or you get left behind. Now, I'm not going to say that Jerry Jones is going to be taken down because of this, but this is an important lesson that's being taught. And regardless of whether or not Jerry Jones has the wit or the gray matter to learn this lesson, I'm more concerned with whether or not Black people are paying attention. This is not going to be the end of anything. It's going to be a generational effort. But the lesson that I hope Black people take away from it is twofold. One, you got to step across that line together. Stop thinking that you're going to cheer one person on to fight your battles. And the second, once you have stepped across that line, you have got to commit. White supremacy has never had the ability to crush us. They've always either seen that we are a 5-minute people who lose interest in rebellion 5 minutes after it's begun, or they see that we are a people who unfortunately do not have clear objectives and goals, so the revolution very quickly falls into entropy, and that we are sitting around apparently thinking that somebody else is going to be the champion for us. White supremacy has always relied on our complete lack of persistence, that any sort of rebellion that we start usually burns itself out in short order because of the fact that we don't follow through. Of 5-minute people who apparently think you're going to win a war before the end of the next commercial break. No, no more. You digging your heels for the long haul. You are going to be out there as long as it takes. They can threaten your money. So the hell what? You get your economic foundation in place, you'll be having your money and eating their lunch. They're threatening that you're not going to have white people's support. That's what the ratings really represent to them. It ain't about money. That's about, this is white people support that you're losing money. White people support you're losing money. Well, you know what? You guys can't take your freaking minds off of us anyway. We are a perennial obsession for you. A crucial part of white culture is to obsess and fixate over Black people. So it's not as if they're going to leave us alone. It's not as if they're going to have us out of mind for very long, because they never do have us out of mind for very long. They'll gripe and complain, and then as soon as they see that we're serious, they'll come to terms with it. The griping and complaining will stop when they realize that adults don't listen to whining children. And some things are going to be changing because we're going to have some agendas on the table, and we're going to show that you ain't got to like making changes, but you got to make them. That which you cannot defeat, you have no choice but to accept. That's the lesson that needs to be taken away from all this. Jerry Jones and the ideology that he represents isn't going to be crushed out of existence by the NFL. It's going to be crushed out of existence by you. But you got to show the persistence. As most of you know, I don't really comment on sports. I don't watch sports, don't give a damn about them. Kind of like with the same thing with entertainment. I don't really comment about entertainment because I don't give a damn about much entertainment either. To me, entertainment and sports are only useful to the extent that they can forward our power. That is to say, forward our value system. That's what media is all about. But I did think that it bears noting that, as I told you, the so-called ratings decline of football was going to stop. I've been telling you guys this for weeks now. In fact, I've been telling you about this longer than weeks now. I've been going back well over a month, where I was telling you that these so-called ratings slumped. All of these pale males, people like Sean Hannity and Ben Shapiro, all these right-wing nuts saying, oh, football's ratings are down, football ratings are down, you see, the country doesn't like it, football ratings are down. You'd probably notice that this week you haven't been hearing the pale males getting out there and saying that. Now, one has to wonder, what could have possibly happened in the last few days, the last 72 hours, that would make it where we're not hearing them talking about football ratings in decline? Oh, that's right. Sunday Night Football's ratings are up. I told you that the main reason the ratings were down is because ratings are down for media across the board. It happens every year about this time.
You sending me stuff?
And on top of that, for football, when the football games are sucking, of course the people are not going to be watching. Tune in so they can see some sports. The so-called protests only take about a second to do. It doesn't really mean anything. If you want to watch football, you can still do so. The players are still playing. As I told you, that which you cannot defeat, you have no choice but to accept. So that being the case, since the pale males are no longer deciding that they're going to decry and call out and celebrate the decline of football ratings, because the ratings are now back up, as I said they would be, and the whining white contingent have egg all over their ridiculous faces. Since apparently they don't have anything to say, then I'm sure that they won't mind if I go ahead and tell you what's really going on here. I say that the football ratings are up because of the protests. That's right. Because the black men have gotten out there and gotten their say, because black men are able to put this issue of white supremacy on the march, on the national agenda, because black men are defying white power. I think that people like that. I think people are looking at that and saying, you know, that's the kind of show I want to watch. Yeah, that's what I think is happening here. I think people are tuning in now because they support the protests. They certainly aren't tuning in because they dislike the protests. Now are they? Oh, yes, indeed. It is great to see the, as Mike Murphy put it, incompetent operative class of the conservative movement, which is what their media, what they call their media, that's all it is, a bunch of incompetent operatives who say whatever they think sounds good at the moment, and they're brain-dead minions who listen to them. They know the crap that Sean Hannity says is all bull. They know the stuff that Rush Limbaugh says doesn't make an ounce of sense, and it doesn't matter whether they're proven right or wrong. All that matters is you're psychologically masturbating them, and that's what matters the most. That's what they're there for. What they want is somebody to validate that white is better than. And with that, you don't have to say white, because of the fact that they control so many of the institutions, so much of the society. If you see black people opposing something, all you have to do is to speak in support of whatever black people are opposing, and you can go ahead and deny there's racial all you want. The point gets across loud and clear. The society is complete. Every aspect of the society is completely and thoroughly stratified by race, completely and thoroughly defined in that context, because everything in the society is more or less there for the sake of trying to support and promote white privilege. So you have to make it clear, this is what's for white folks and nothing for the rest of you. You got to make sure that it's clear. Even without using the word white, you got to make sure that it does it in everything but name. So when the football players, without ever saying white supremacy, without ever calling anyone out by name, the very fact that the football players said that we are protesting the systematic killing of black people and the injustice system that is using the prisons as the slave pens. You've gone from the slave pens to the state pen. We see this and we're calling it out in front of the world. Yeah, the white folks had their shock. You Negroes, you're in revolt. We're not going to watch. But I told you they'd come back because they ain't got a goddamn thing else that they're doing that is anywhere near as interesting as the protesting $40 million slaves. So whether you like it, whether you don't like it, you got no choice but to watch it, because black is still the best thing on TV. I told you that all of the typical white whining would stop, because it always does. And the team owners knew this. I told you that it wasn't going to take seasons. It would take weeks, if that. And of course, the black men stood their ground. The black men did not budge. They didn't back down. They doubled down. And the white supremacists, their flunkies, they are now the ones who have said, well, okay, guess we can't beat them. Sure hope I got to cheer on Green Bay this weekend. Yeah, see, that's what happens when black men decide that we're not going to be moved. They were giving all of these threats just for weeks now, just delivering the threats. People are not going to watch football anymore. They're going to be through with football, and you better stop. You better not do it anywhere else. You better not. You better not. Or what? We'll stop watching. That's what it is. Yeah, right. Whatever. There's a lesson to be learned in that as far as white supremacy goes. Much of what white supremacy does is based on bluffing. It's based on talking a good game and seeing whether or not you're going to stick to your guns, because the truth of the matter is white supremacy has not really had that many victories. I'm talking about in a historical sense, in a contemporaneous sense. They haven't really had that many victories. What they've had is the victims of white supremacy who have never stayed the course, who have never decided to dig in their heels, and we're digging in for the long haul. What happens is we'll make some noise. As Dr. King put it, the Negro will blow off some steam, and then we go back to business as habitual. That's what usually happens. And white supremacy knows this. They've conditioned us to do that, but it's up to us to break that conditioning. It is not enough merely to say that something is wrong. We have to put some agendas on the table, make it clear this is what we're going to have, and you do not stop whatever aggressive action that you're taking until you have acquired what it is you set out to get. And that cannot be based on what your enemy says. It's based on you. You can only be satisfied that victory has been attained when you have gotten it on your terms. Your enemy will sit there before you even begin your assault, before you even begin your offensive. The enemy will say, "Oh, too much! You're doing too much." Will you fall for it? In too many instances, we have. So the bad guys are well aware that all they usually have to do is just sit back and lay back in the cut. What'll happen is we will eventually peter out under our own weight because of the fact we always have. We will not actually finish what it is that we start. And all it takes is some slight criticism, especially from white folks who claim to be our pals, the good white liberals. All it takes is a little bit of criticism from them, and we're like, I guess we've lost all the white support. You never had the white support to begin with, left, right, center, or otherwise. So the lesson to be taken away from all of this is when you dig in your heels, when you make it clear that you're coming at white supremacy and you will not be stopped, when you make it crystal clear that you don't care how much bitching and moaning that they do, because they're always, as I told you, they're always bitching and moaning about something. When you make it clear that their whining means nothing to you, that adults don't listen to babies who sit, complain and whine, little whining white children are never going to move the black adults. When you make it clear that this is going to come down to a battle of wills and that the bad guys showed up unarmed, then what happens is you're going to win. The bad guys don't really have the stomach for a fight. They don't really have the belly for this kind of thing. Everybody says they want war, but nobody really wants it.
I like this one too.
These guys have run the tables because we let them. This is an example of what happens when we decide we're not going to let them. And it ain't just Sunday night football the ratings are up on. You've also got Monday night football, so it ain't no fluke. The ratings are coming back because the same people who were whining and complaining a week and a half ago, now they're tuning in to watch some football. What the hell is they going to watch? Ice hockey? Yeah, if they were going to go to these other sports, they'd have done it by now. And the sweet part about it is we get to rub their faces in it. You don't get to have President Tangerine and his cohort of right-wing racists talking about how these protests better stop. Oh, nobody wants to see this. And then all of a sudden they think that they're going to slink away. As soon as the ratings start to rebound, all of a sudden they're going to go hide in their holes. And, we're going to talk about something else. We're going to talk about Russia and uranium. No. No, you don't get to deny this one. I put this on my Twitter page. I want to make sure that it's there so that everybody sees this. It is important. It is important because a large part of how white supremacy operates is by trying to convince you that up is down and down is up, that forwards is backwards and vice versa. It is based on lies, obfuscations. It is based on deception, based on trying to find some way to turn their short-term tactics, and that's all that these clowns calling themselves, oh, we're not going to watch football. That's a tactic. It's not a strategy. But in too many cases, their tactics have been successful. This time, it wasn't. But remember what I also told you. Once the ratings begin to rebound and they throw in the towel, well, that's not going to be the end of it necessarily. They'll move on to something else, probably not football related necessarily, but they'll move on to something else. And the players are not there for the sake of trying to fight your battles for you. The players are there because they say that they stand in solidarity with you, but you have to do your part, and that is show the players what it is that they're standing in solidarity with. The players are not going to be passing any legislation for you. They're not going to be campaigning for a DA that has some steel in their spine, or for a moral judge, or to remove racist police chiefs, or to start prosecuting race soldiers in the police departments and the sheriff's departments and the state bureaus of investigation and what have you. That's not what the NFL is doing. They're simply doing something public that helps to put this on the map. It's up to you to use a sports analogy, grab the ball. It's up to you to take the ball and run with it. They're handing it off to you, and they've given you a lot of momentum. But what they've also done is to give white supremacy a black eye. There's no way in the world that they're going to be able to paint this as anything other than an unconditional failure on their part. Everybody knew that there was going to be a backlash from white folks. That's what Donald Trump's election was about. It's the white lash. Everybody knew that these football players taking a stand against white supremacy was going to make some of the white folks feel some kind of way. Everybody knew that. That was baking the cake. It was predictable. But what was also equally predictable is these clowns don't really have what it takes to get in there for the long haul. They just don't. They never have. It has been our lack of resolve that has emboldened them. And we got to take responsibility for that. We got to start making it clear that we cannot expect any 5-minute victories. Black people are always looking for a 5-minute victory. We figure we're supposed to get out there, do some chants, or do some other sort of gesture, and apparently it's supposed to be sunshine and rainbows from there. If it was that easy to overthrow white supremacy, we'd have overthrown it a long time ago. Our problem happens to be persistence, perseverance. We have to show that we're not in it for the next 5 minutes, that we are in it for the next 5 millennia. We are not merely talking about the lifespan, the typical lifespan of a civilization. We're talking about epics here. We're talking about something that fundamentally changes the planet to its very core. Is that what you're fighting for? Are you fighting for something that will be eternal? Or are you simply trying to figure out if you can get that kind of undeniable change, that kind of fundamental revolution on the cheap? You can cheer the players for showing this kind of bravery, but don't you dare sit there and act as if it's their responsibility to fight your war. They've done their part. If the protests were to stop tomorrow, it doesn't matter because the players have already done what they were supposed to do. At this point, ball's in your court now. The bad guys have already capitulated, as we knew they would. We knew that these guys were going to cave in. They always do when black people stick to their guns. They always give in because they're flimsy, they're spineless. There's no substance to them. And their mouthpieces fall silent because that's what happens whenever they get substantively challenged. They don't actually have anything to say. They got some stupid talking points that are meant to psychologically masturbate their brain-dead viewers and listeners. And after they get their fix of being told that white is right and that the Negroes need to know their place, afterwards they're done. They got their fix and they're done. And what the NFL players did was they denied their feel-good moment. And you got a lot of white folks out there who are butthurt, grinding their teeth. And they're also setting their TiVo for Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. That's the reality, folks. This fight's not going to be won over a single day. I told you that. It ain't going to be won over a single weekend or a single football season. We are in for a generational struggle here. And how long it takes is largely going to be dependent upon how much force of will we bring to the table. I know that a lot of you are going to be looking and going, oh man, what the NFL did, that was easy. Well, in relative terms, yeah. To be able to break a deadlock and to be able to prove the white supremacists wrong, that is easy. But breaking the white supremacist power is not going to be. Take this as an object lesson. This is what happens when you decide that you don't give a damn what the bad guys are saying. Their propaganda, no matter how loud they scream it, and they were screaming it, they had every sort of headline that they could have. They wanted to make it where first thing out of their mouths, nobody's watching the NFL, nobody's watching the NFL. There's these players. Stop protesting white supremacy. You protest white supremacy, and we will all turn against you. The players ignored these lies. They recognized these lies for what they were. You had players saying that they would quit the NFL if they had to stop their protest. Yeah, they made it clear. When you got people like Stallworth, who are saying that he would love to see the entire Cowboys wide receiver core take a knee and then look at Jerry Jones and, what you going to do? You going to tell all of us we can't play? Now you ain't got nobody to throw the ball to. Yes, the players dug in their heels, and they got what they wanted. The NFL had to say, well, we can't really stop the protest. Well, you could try it, but it wouldn't work. And now what you've got is you've got the typical white viewer at home going, okay, well, I guess we lost this one. And they never like taking an L. They're never going to admit we just got our butts waxed. They're never going to admit it any more than their idiotic, incompetent operative class mouthpieces will ever admit it. Don't expect to see any of these clowns saying, you know what? Right, like it or not, the NFL said they wouldn't stop the protests. The ratings are coming back. The ratings are beginning to rise again. Well, I guess we got it wrong. Because after all, isn't that what these bastards are always saying? Well, we're just telling you what the reality is. No, they're not. They're painting their own reality, lost in their own delusion, desperately hoping that their little pathetic fantasies are real, and the NFL players, these black men, just crushed their little daydream. Just crushed it. So what's the excuse going to be now? What are they going to say about this? Nothing. This is one of those embarrassments that you can't really say anything about. What you need to do is you need to say, well, okay, the ratings are going up, no accounting for taste, and try to hopefully move on. So don't let these bastards forget about the fact that they said this. Anytime somebody wants to criticize the NFL protests, the very first thing out of your mouth should be, say, weren't we told that the NFL ratings were going to go down, and now the ratings are going back up again? Weren't we told that the ratings were in the toilet? Now the ratings are starting to come back? Because a large part of this is going to come down to perception. Can people be made to perceive that football is somehow in trouble because of the protests? This is the same crap that they did with Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe. They were hoping to defeat him in the headlines. They failed there too, by the way. Go on YouTube, you can find my classic video, The Truth About Robert Mugabe, where I detail all of that for you. Same game all the time. This is what the white media uses their power for. They try to tell people what to think by telling people what to think about. Now, in this case, the good guys have managed to come out on top. They hung in there, and the bad guys have been silenced. But understand, they got more crap that they're cooking up. They're always cooking up something. And next time, they're going to try to find something where this kind of scenario doesn't play itself out. When you have black men on a global stage who are taking on white supremacy, humiliating the dominant society around the world, I mean, that was just an unabashed throwing their faces in feces when they went to Britain and they took a knee for the American national anthem, but stood for God Save the Queen. And even the white folks in Britain who happen to be racist, and there are a lot of them there, even they were looking at it going, man, they stand for God Save the Queen, but take a knee for the national anthem.
Hey, we should need for her.
Maybe there's something rotten going on over in the U.S. There were a lot of them who were stuck. They would love to be able to support white supremacy, but the problem is you can't do that if the guys are saying we'll stand for the British anthem, but we ain't standing for the American. That kind of humiliation is the sort of thing that people don't forget. Nor should they forget. They should have their faces rubbed in it, and they should have to live with it. Welcome to our world. So it's been one great black eye for white supremacy from the NFL. You want another one? Colin Kaepernick apparently has a book deal, reportedly, worth more than $1 million. Yeah, it's just one of those cases of, for white supremacy, the more you look at the NFL, the more your stomach churns. Yeah, that's right, because this is what it looks like when white supremacy can't put a slant on it, when white supremacy doesn't get to rig the game. Sure, you can blacklist Colin Kaepernick, but he ain't going to stop earning. He just ain't going to stop earning. So Colin Kaepernick has reportedly signed a more than $1 million book deal. That puts him in the big leagues. I mean, you never see Ann Coultergeist or Sean the Pawn Hannity getting that. These clowns don't, but Colin Kaepernick did. And the reason that he's getting a more than $1 million book deal, and he's also filing his grievance with the fact that he's been blacklisted from the NFL, is a matter of, look, if you don't want the guy in the NFL, fine, but you still got to pay him. Ain't that something? Okay, you don't want him in the NFL? Great, you still got to pay him. You don't get to get around that. Now, don't get me wrong, for white supremacy, whatever, wherever it is that he's able to get, and the guys, as far as I'm concerned, for what they've done to this man, they owe him like $150 million. Just what should they pay him? I don't know how much they got. But we know that they basically have decided to try to effectively end his career. As far as they're concerned, the NFL figures, hey, we can wait these guys out. Same way the players knew that they could wait out the white supremacists and the white media, the bigots who claimed that they weren't going to watch football. They're like, we can wait these scumbags out. The team owners also come from the exact same mentality. As far as they're concerned, they can wait the players out. What do? Don't do anything. This is not a scenario where there's too many good options. So you wait until circumstances change. Right now, you got the wind in your face. You got to wait till you got the wind to your back. So Colin Kaepernick, in all likelihood, is going to win his grievance. They're going to do it just if for no other reason than to get him to go away. They're not letting him back in the NFL, I would imagine. It's a long shot if they would. Something of that nature would take the actual players themselves on a particular team campaigning for him. And let's be honest, I can't think of any teams where the players are going to actively decide we want whoever the active quarterback is for our team to get benched. I'm not really seeing that scenario evolving. But Colin Kaepernick is in the news for very, very good reasons, as usual. And the bad guys have got to be seething because white supremacy is finding that it's not getting their way. And they don't have an answer for that because they're not used to black folks actually putting up a fight. They're not used to black folks saying, you know what, you can do whatever it is you think that you're going to do, but we're still going to fight you. We're still going to resist you. We are still going to hang in there. We're digging in our heels, and we shall not take one step back. Not so much as one step. I've been saying this for well over a decade now. If we fight, we will win. But if we don't, we'll die. Today, you're seeing what happens when black people dig in their heels and say, we're fighting. White supremacy crumbles. White supremacy folds. Like a poker game. Because they've always been bluffing. The problem is black people don't have the nerve. In too many cases, we don't have the nerve to ante up. And we lack the foresight to call their bluff. And that's on us. So please don't take this as me taking a victory lap. This is simply one good day, but it will be the only one we have for a while unless we learn the right lesson from this. And the right lesson from this is you fight white supremacy for the long haul. You do not fight them for a single day. You do not fight them for a single weekend. Day in, day out, white supremacy should get no rest from you. And you should never plan to give them any rest. Do you want to know what you call a world where white supremacy finds itself under siege? Every time they look up, they're getting kicked in the teeth, getting kicked in the behind, getting kicked in their non-existent gonads. You want to know what you call a world where white supremacy finds itself the perpetual subject of hostility and aggression? Do you want to know what you call that world? You call that a righteous world. That's what you call it. You call that the world set to rights. But you're never going to get it if you think that some NFL football players are going to get it for you. You're never going to get it if you think that victory looks like Colin Kaepernick finally getting signed to a team again. Victory is when white supremacy is down and out for good. And that day is not coming unless you bring it about. That's the lesson you take away from this. The NFL players did not hope that the team owners were going to do something for them. The NFL players were not hoping that Roly-Poly Martin and the rest of the corrupt, crumbling scumbags in the old black media, the dead black media, the liars, clowns, crooks, and cronies, who, by the way, have been trying to sing a different tune lately. They've been trying to hopefully get their mojo back, talking like us, too late, clowns. Game over, you lose. But the NFL players were not looking to see if somebody else was going to come to their defense, not even us. They weren't waiting to see if the masses of black people were going to finally ante up. They looked and said, whatever the consequences are, we accept them. This is something we've got to do. And this is something we're not backing down on. And the results were as predictable as they were glorious. White supremacy folded. White supremacy relented. Bad guys are trying to now put a pretty face on it by not saying anything. They're hoping that this would be a tree that fell in the forest, but nobody heard it. But in this case, it's an entire forest that fell, and they're hoping that nobody will notice. And whether or not this leads to hopefully another victory, that's going to be entirely in your hands. The $40 million slaves have now revolted. They have handed the ball off to you. What are you going to do with it? Oh my, what a difference a single day makes. But of course, it wasn't just one day. This has all been years in the making, as I'll detail for you in a moment. So Colin Kaepernick went from being the only guy who took a knee to now the whole damn league's taking a knee. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but Jerry Jones, who had been dropping the veiled threats just 36 hours ago, tonight in the Cowboys game against the Cardinals, Jerry Jones himself was taking a knee along with the Cowboys. Yes, sir, indeed. When the quintessential good old boy from America's team takes a knee, that's when you know that the facade of the white solidarity for white supremacy has gotten some major cracks in it. You see, the problem happens to be that you got a lot of clowns and fools, the Fox News crowd, or the false news crowd as they should be known, who have convinced themselves of all manner of lies that apparently NASCAR is the wave of the future. They just don't understand that the revenues for the NFL dwarf NASCAR. That's what happens when you are what Mike Murphy called the incompetent operative class. And before I go any farther, I want to just go ahead and say this from the outset. Look, for the cynics, trolls, and professional distractors out there who are terrified of seeing the $40 million slaves having become more disobedient instead of less, here's a reality check. There were only a few ball players who took a stand last year. Now, entire teams, hundreds of players, are taking a stand. Looks like all of them are. See, they learned the lesson, at least for now, it seems they learned the lesson that if everybody crosses that line together, hey, they can't punish all of us. We all cross that line together. Now they got to deal with the situation. You ain't going to be singling anyone out. That's the power of we. A power that black people have exercised far too seldom and not with anywhere near as much persistence. Yes, it's true, we hadn't seen this mass protest by the entire NFL until after Trump's moronic statement at that Alabama Klan rally and his idiotic Twitter tweets. And a lot of you have said, well, they're only protesting. You don't forget they're only protesting because Trump decided to call them out personally. Well, to say that the players didn't care at all until Trump attacked them personally, that kind of sounds like a post hoc ergo propter hoc argument. For those of you who don't know, that's Latin for after the fact, therefore because of the fact. And it's well known, that phrase, post hoc ergo propter hoc, because it's a well-known logical fallacy. Colin Kaepernick is gone, has been for a while now, and the NFL players began their push for some expression of equality from the league weeks ago. They didn't just start it this week, they've been pushing for this weeks ago. It's only the last few days that Rush Loudmouth and the rest of the right-wing hate machine picked up the story and ran with it. And since Trump takes his cues from the incompetent operative class, he decided to echo their racist sentiment. The people who we understand to be white supremacists, well, as Donald Trump calls them, his base. And for whatever reason, the players are pushing back, and rightly so. It's happening across the board. And it's really going to be hell when the NBA jumps on board. The white supremacists are in retreat on this one because they're trying to find some way to forward the narrative that, oh, people are abandoning football. No, they're not. Well, people are preferring to watch college ball. Never mind the fact the University of Missouri, the college ball players, is where the protest started. They were the first ones to, as a group, lock arms and protest the deliberate advocacy of white supremacy that was going on at the University of Missouri. The college ball players did it first. So this is not going to spread to college ball. It's simply going to be resurgent in college ball, and we all know it's coming. But of course, you got those who must persist in hiding their heads in the sand or up their rear ends. Of all people, Judge Jeanine Pirro of Fox News was whining about this true expression of free speech by these NFL players, saying that it's a privilege for you to have money. It's a privilege. These guys work for every damn thing they got. It's like saying that if I put in a hard work day's work, then it's a privilege for me to get my paycheck. Yeah, if you're black, it's a privilege for you to get paid. You don't have a right to an honest day's work for an honest day's pay.
Right.
You don't have a work. You do not have a right to be properly compensated for the effort that you put out. When you've made an agreement to be compensated for that effort, that's a privilege. Well, we pay you if we want to. You Negroes really are asking for too dang much. You think you're entitled to something. Yeah, I'm entitled to what I work for. And this Jeanine Pirro clown, she had the nerve to try to say that the NFL should be ashamed of itself because they've got a problem with players abusing women. This heifer works for Fox News, which has had to pay out over $100 million in the last year alone to women who were their main spokespeople, spokes-anchors. Everyone from Gretchen Carlson to Megyn Kelly has talked about how they were victims of sexual harassment to rape. Roger Goodell has never been sued or accused of sexual harassment or sexual abuse. Roger Ailes, the founder and until he died, the head of Fox News, he was. Colin Kaepernick's never been accused of abusing women. Bill O'Reilly has. No network, No station in the history of broadcasting has had the terrifying record of abusing women that Fox News has had. But of course, Janine Pirro totally left that out. I guess when the elephant is dancing in the room, you don't feel the need to point it out. The founder of the network Fox News and their biggest star were the poster children for the abuse of women. You have no leg to stand on to criticize the NFL in any shape, form, or fashion. Nobody at False News has any business whatsoever talking about mistreatment of women, and yet Janine Pirro tried it with a straight face. And the empty-headed morons who watched that sewer, they no doubt thought that it sounded good. It never occurred to them that, well, maybe Fox News should not be throwing stones at anyone else's house when they live in a freaking greenhouse. And Janine Pirro had no problem putting on the kind of phony indignation that are the staples of the Fox News network. This is what qualifies as Donald Trump supporters. This is the class and caliber of individuals who are indignant about black athletes taking a moral stand. As black people, we should take responsibility for the part that we've played in this mess, because we have a bad habit of letting the perfect become the enemy of the practical. Look, we can all make suggestions about how these players should have acted sooner, but the reality is they're acting now. They're doing the right thing now. And I don't see you objecting to that, so why don't you try to do something intelligent and see what use that you can make of it? That's what we did with Black Lives Matters. We didn't start Black Lives Matters. We knew that there were all sorts of shadowy forces behind the scenes who did not have our best interests at heart, who were responsible for it. But while we did not hijack Black Lives Matters, we certainly made good use of it. We know that Black Lives Matters was meant to be a springboard to a movement that would eventually have nothing to do with us, but we blunted the effort to divert the issue. All of the efforts to morph Black Lives Matters into a Gay Lives Matters, Palestinian Lives Matters, Trans Lives Matters, all of that failed because of us. And while we don't truck with Black Lives Matters, we still managed to use it for our ends. We managed to make it into something that we could focus energy toward our interests. To put a movement with the word black in it at the forefront of public discourse. We did that. Otto von Bismarck said that politics is the art of the possible. Now, other groups realize that they don't have the numbers or the moral authority to protest anything in America, so they're always trying to see if it's possible to ride on the coattails of our suffering, because we alone have both the numbers and, more importantly than that, we have the unassailable, unquestionable moral legitimacy when it comes to the issues of the day in the United States. Everyone else understands that all protest movements are potential opportunities to advance their own agendas. They have no problem hijacking other people's movements. You know, we could stand to observe that. And by the way, I'm not a fan of football, and I don't watch it, so I don't care. But ideally, for those who still want to continue contributing to the opulent lifestyles of racists like Mark Cuban and Jerry Jones, it would be nice to see one of these teams' players actively campaign for Colin Kaepernick to be made their quarterback. I'd like to see the players do that. USA Today had to run an article saying, quote, in wake of President Trump's harsh words, it's time for NFL owners to sign Colin Kaepernick. Now, we've been saying that for weeks now. We've been saying for the longest time that Colin Kaepernick should never have been fired, should never have been blackballed, and that it's time for the league to re-sign him. And what would that say? Man, if you think that they're having conniptions now, these guys will be out in the streets ripping out what few strands of hair they got left. To them, everything is a front in the race war. And every bit of ground that they lose brings them closer to white supremacy's defeat. And white supremacy is all they've got. It's given them every crumb of their daily bread. You think that this is merely an argument. To them, it's life and death. You think that this is merely about sports. To them, this is about whether or not a group is going to be able to dominate the society so that everything that they say is law. You better not infringe on our comfort zone. Your rights end whereby personal comfort begins. That's what white supremacy is about for the dominant society. That's why they're always trying to shame black people, coerce black people, threaten black people into accepting an unequal status quo. And I'm not sure if Colin Kaepernick being re-signed, at least not this season anyway, I'm not so certain how realistic a proposition that is. It would be great to see the players decide to make that into something that they demand to see. But a year ago, nobody thought that entire teams would refuse to take to the field for the national anthem either, and now it seems the whole damn league is in revolt. Dr. John Henrik Clarke gave his classic essay, his classic lecture, a revolt in the servants' quarters, talking about how white supremacy had divvied up the world and identified certain portions as being the Europeans' homes, other places as being their outposts, and then the rest of the world, the squalid areas that they had not taken the resources out of, those places would be the servants' quarters. And that's how you see the United States organized. There are places that the dominant societies identified as being their homes. There are other places, mostly political, that they've identified as being their outposts in our communities. And then there's the slums and the ghettos. Those are the servants' quarters. And now what's happening in front of the whole world, there's a revolt in the servants' quarters. You had NFL players protesting in Britain, of all places. This is showing the whole world that the United States of America ain't some nice, happy place. Doing this in front of the whole world so that the entire international community can see this. Ain't just something on TV. See, the revolution won't be televised. The revolution will be live. This is something that the alt-right and the pale males will never understand. While they're trying to figure out how many internet memes they can come up with, this is what happens when you have a group of pampered, a bunch of self-indulgent, overly entitled chumps who actually pretend as if they can stand for something. You're too weak, you're too wobbly, your spine's made of jello. All of you World of Warcraft warriors, all of you Call of Duty commandos, pretending as if you're going to fight when you ain't going to bust a grape. They think that they're going to win the race war online. That's why they spend all their time coming up with stupid memes and, Peppy the Frog and all the rest of that crap. They think that they're going to win this fight online because everybody has catered to them. They are used to the fact that the internet is largely, the biggest platforms and the biggest venues on the internet happen to be owned by them. So what they're thinking is, that's our advantage, without realizing that the second that black people take the fight offline, you lose. And that's what they're seeing now. Just because you got a bunch of empty-headed chumps online saying, I'm not going to buy any more NFL, I'm going to, they think that because they do that online, because that's important to them, since they live online, they figure that is the real world. And it's not. The NFL players are showing what the real world is, and in the real world, white supremacy is getting kicked in its non-existent cojones. But this protest won't really hit its stride until we call it what it is. People are wondering, what are they protesting? Now, you and I know what they're protesting, but we got to come up the middle. Let's not sit here and sugarcoat it. Let's not sit here and whitewash it. Let's not sit here and cushion the blow. What this is about is nothing less than stopping white people from continuing their self-appointed sanctioned murders of black people. That's what this is about. What's the protest about? It is about white people who have been acting as a group to murder black people and then to abuse the so-called justice system in order to de facto legalize it. White people have organized themselves into a death squad complete with a rubber stamp committee for the killing of black people. And until you call it that for what it is, your protest ain't hit its stride. You can't dance around the edges. What are you protesting? protesting the killings of black people, but we're also protesting the deliberate, malignant, intentional sanctioning of those killings by white people, not just white judges, not just white DAs, not just white police chiefs, but white citizens who come onto juries to deliberately act as support staff for race soldiers who carry out acts of domestic terrorism. Nobody's protesting the flag. The flag is not what's killing people. The national anthem, odious as it is, it ain't killing anybody either. It is the police who are doing it, but not just the police, also private white citizens, because you have the white citizenry who has become emboldened to act as a rubber stamp committee for the killing of black people. This deliberate, systematic, extrajudicial war that white citizens are fighting against the black ones here in the United States. And they are using the judiciary in order to carry it out, in order to give themselves de facto immunity from law. Sure, the laws are on the books, but in order for the laws to be enforced, you're going to have it done in court. They've decided that they're going to act as a voting block in the jury room, and the DAs are doing everything they can. They're all acting together. We know what the game is. We're all on code. If you're going to rouse the conscience of the nation, then you need to point out whose conscience it is that needs rousing. Better yet, point out why it is that a certain group of people in society seem totally blind to what the rest of the world can clearly see. Black people are scared to make white people feel uncomfortable about anything, and that's a large part of what has emboldened them. They should have been spoken against a long time ago. They should have been called on the carpet a long time ago. But black people are forever trying to figure out how can we find a way to turn the hearts and minds of white folks without offending them. Well, we don't want them to feel defensive. Gee, they feel defensive for 250 years now. During slavery, they were defensive. During Reconstruction, they were defensive. During Jim Crow, they were defensive. During segregation, they were defensive. Post-civil rights, they were defensive. Damn, they're defensive today. Gee, is there any time that they're not defensive? No one's attacking them, no one's harming them, but damn if they ain't on the defensive. They tell all kinds of lies and we let them get away with it. Well, now they're telling you to not make them feel uncomfortable as they wipe you out. It's time to start putting them on the hot seat again. And we know the white right is scared because they've seen how the protest has proliferated. No, black people do not have a media of our own. We don't have the cameras, but it looks like the most high-profile black people in America, the ones who do have the cameras, and you can't turn the cameras off of them because they're the whole reason the cameras are there, they are taking that moment and running with it. And the bad guys don't have an answer to that. The threat that the dominant society has always held over black people's heads is we're going to cut you off financially. Stay in your place, boy, or we'll cut you off. Well, that threat has lost its power. Seems the $40 million slaves are attempting to pull at their chains. Notice the wording that I'm using, they're pulling at their chains. Until I see them decide to take their fate in their own hands financially, they ain't nowhere near breaking those chains. But for right now, they seem to be pulling on them. Jerry Jones made a proper ass and spectacle of himself, casting aspersions on the players. He didn't like the idea of refusing to stand for the anthem. Taking a knee to him was a bad idea. Well, tonight against the Cardinals, some of the Cowboys decided to call Jerry Jones bluff. And what did he do? Well, as the media is now reporting, and as I posted on my Twitter feed, Jerry Jones, the owner of America's team, was out there with the players, taking a knee right alongside with them, arms locked with the players, before the national anthem, but the point is he was out there. Oh, I would wonder what it is the white right is going to say about that. Because after all, Donald Trump said, if these guys take a knee, you're going to fire the sons of bitches, right? And now you got the team owners out there with the players. Oh, how humiliating that must be for Donald Trump. Every time he looks up, he thinks the people who are on his side are going to stand with him, and they wind up stabbing him in the back. Oh my, you can't trust anybody these days. When the team owners And not just any team owner, Jerry Jones, the quintessential good old boy, the guy who's the owner of America's team, which he has run into the ground, might I add. He's out there with the players. Well, so much for the team owners deciding to fire everyone. They've joined the freaking protest. Jerry Jones made his fortune off of the Dallas Cowboys. Having an NFL license, having an NFL franchise, that's a freaking license to print money. It's part of the reason why it's so damn hard to get one. You got to have a few $billion. You got to be just hyper capitalized in order to get an NFL franchise. I mean, you can't just show up and say, I got a great idea for a team logo. They ain't going to cut it. And if all you got is one billionaire, that ain't going to cut it either. The NFL is a world-spanning economic juggernaut. Why do you think it is that states are willing to pay over $1 billion to build a stadium for an NFL team? Jerry Jones knows which side his bread's buttered on. He ain't bringing in a damn penny for the freaking Cowboys. He knows that. He needs them. They don't need him. They can get traded to another team, get paid, and produce. Jerry Jones can't go anywhere. Without the players, he doesn't exist. See, that's what's really going on here when black men decide to flex their muscles and decide that they're going to throw their weight around. The world moves when a black man decides to throw his weight around. Problem is, we don't do it very often. When the slaves stand up to the oppressors stand down. So all the tough talk from Donald Trump and, until recently, some of the good old boys about what they were going to do if people call themselves protesting, that's starting to crumble. About the only place where anyone is retarded enough to try that claptrap is NASCAR. NASCAR ain't got a single black person in it. And might I add, NASCAR is, again, one of those boutique industries. Nothing compared to the NFL. Nobody asked NASCAR for their uninformed opinion. Nobody asked NASCAR to weigh in on the NFL protest. But the problem is this is all they could do. This is what white supremacists are good for. You'll be having a conversation talking about the weighty issues of the day, and then some unthinking clod with a dunce cap on and his dirty bed sheets goes, I don't like that Obama guy. We're talking about the price of rice in China, stupid. Yeah, but Obama, he's a bad guy. They think to themselves that somehow they're either annoying you with, they may be annoying you, but not in the sense of, oh God, what are we going to do? It's more along the lines of, we got to do something about this loudmouth idiot. NASCAR isn't going to protest. That's fine. Nobody watches NASCAR anyway, so nobody will notice. They are so desperate to try to find a way to horn their way into the conversation because nobody's looking at them. Nobody's paying attention to them. Nobody cares about them. They're irrelevant. And they know that they're irrelevant, and it hurts them. They're so used to the idea that people hang on their every word, or at least that what they say matters. What they're finding out is that what they said only mattered until other people were able to get a platform and speak with a voice loud enough to be heard. Now, in a single day, they don't matter at all. If the inbred, mouth-breathing, knuckle-dragging, meth-huffing, mayonnaise sandwich-eating trailer apes want to go ahead and say that NASCAR ain't going to take a knee, so the hell what? You could go ahead and wrap yourself in the American flag. You could put on your red, white, blue underoos. Don't nobody give a damn. NASCAR is the very definition of pointless. Literally. That's what stock car racing is. It is the definition of pointless. Nobody cares. If the NASCAR, if the shoe was on the other foot and you had the good old boys at NASCAR deciding that they were going to do some sort of protest, let's say if they were going to do a support the wall protest, or if they were going to do some we support Donald Trump protest, who the hell would give a damn? Would anyone join with them? Could you see anybody joining with them? Today, headlines were made because a 97-year-old World War II veteran, again, I posted this on my Twitter feed, a 97-year-old World War II veteran took a photograph of himself taking a knee. This guy's 97 years old. He served in World War II. Donald Trump dodged the draft. So we got a draft dodger who liked to slam John McCain, a guy who, when he had the chance to serve his country, Trump ran. I guess while John McCain was fighting the war against communism in Southeast Asia, Donald Trump was fighting the war against the 18th hole green in Mar-a-Lago. It would be funny if it wasn't so tragic. Football players don't grow on trees, you know. And that's the reason why the team owners understand that they got to tread lightly in this case. Because the problem is we've been here before. We've been in this situation before, okay? In the 1960s, you had white people saying, I'm not going to watch basketball because that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, how dare he? I'm not going to watch boxing matches anymore because of Muhammad Ali. Not going to watch football because of Jim Brown. You niggers, you're privileged to be famous. You know, you're privileged to be making money. And you're not grateful for what we good white folks have done for you. We've been through this before. Just out of curiosity, did football go out of business? Did basketball go out of business? Did boxing go away, or did they become bigger than they'd ever been? See, there's a reason why you don't want to be on the wrong side of history, because those who are on the wrong side of history also turn out to be on the wrong side of business, too. The two are absolutely intertwined. And by the way, on a side note, for those of you still out there pining away for that Black-Brown alliance, when the Pittsburgh Steelers were in their locker room, there was one cravenly, pathetic, cowardly punk who decided that he would try to cater to the NASCAR crowd. Alejandro Villanueva decided to be the one lone moron who would try to get some praise from Fox News. And that's what was going through his otherwise empty head. Oh, but today, less than 24 hours later, that boot-licking jackass was saying that he apologized for, quote, throwing his team under the bus, disrespecting his coach, disrespecting his team, lying bastard. He's not sorry for anything. He thought that the inbred, meth-huffing morons who he was trying to cater to would carry the day, and instead he sees that he chose the wrong side. So now he's trying to get back on the right side. There's a whole lot of that going on. Ray Lewis, who was the poster child for coonery, he's decided that he wouldn't take one knee, he'd take two knees. Well, considering that he'd been on both knees for white supremacy for so many years, it's a posture that he's used to. And he ain't alone. A lot of the clowns who were out there saying, y'all gonna get us in trouble, a lot of them who were out there campaigning for some butter biscuits, now all of a sudden they're trying to be little armchair militants. Oh, so we went from America's a good place, ain't never done nothing wrong, why would you want to protest? It's bigger than the game, you know. We've gone from that to, I'm taking a knee. No, both knees. Yeah. You see, when black people decide that as a group we're going to stop caring about making sure white people are perfectly pleased with us, when we decide to put our power first instead of putting their comfort level with us first, the world moves. People who just 24 hours ago were telling everybody how they were going to tell us what's what, as soon as they got in front of us, they said, is there room for me to kneel down to? The bad guys are finding themselves in full retreat. Trump's spokesliar, Sarah Sanders, was tying her own forked tongue in knots today, trying to defend Trump's indefensible behavior and trying to backtrack from those earlier stances. Even now, they're finding out that they've reached the end of the road with their little would-be distraction deflection. Oh, they're disrespecting the flag. They're finding out that they ain't getting any mileage out of that. It's not intimidating anyone. Trying to mischaracterize people. There used to be a time we could get away with that, but the thing is, black people are much better at correcting the record than the Democrats are. So now you got Trump and his surrogates saying, well, you had Sarah Sanders going, well, why don't they protest the police? who are protecting them in the stadiums. That's stupid shrew. That heifer doesn't know it, but she inadvertently endorsed the idea that the players should protest the police. She just opened the door to that. I'm telling you, you see the same white commentators who were making idle threats, and they have shown that their love of sports is more important to them than their idle threats. White people love their entertainment, by the way. Never underestimate that. Now they've been reduced to saying, well, at least we have college football. But you might not. Because as I pointed out, the University of Missouri, they were the ones protesting long before Colin Kaepernick. Black men, this is the power that we've always had. A power that we have refused to exercise for hundreds of years. We've allowed the tail to wag the dog. We've let the white supremacists make their idle threats, but then again, why shouldn't they? I mean, we keep running away the moment that they give us one cross look. Their threats have always been enough to make black folks head for the hills. This little trick has worked for so long, it's no wonder they still try it. I mean, when something works, that's what you do. We condition them to issue these threats nonstop because we have consistently reacted to the threats. We've reacted the wrong way. Time for that to change. Besides, what the hell do you even need a national anthem at a sports event for? I was trying to tell some folks the other day that there's a reason for that. The idea of you need to salute the flag at sporting events occupy a unique place in the culture. You go all the way back to ancient Rome with that one. When the gladiators were in the arena, it is not just something in the movies. It is true that the gladiators were required to say, we who are about to die salute you, to the emperor. When the Roman emperor would be in attendance at the Colosseum, the gladiators would have to turn to the box, to the stands where the emperor sat, and they would raise their spears or raise their weapon or what have you and say at the top of their lungs, we who are about to die salute you. You're about to die, you're saluting this pompous jackass who spends his days reclining, eating grapes. Why not? The emperor's supposed to be akin to a god. So you're more concerned about entertaining him than you are about your own life. Gee, does that sound even vaguely familiar to you? Totalitarian regimes have always relied upon the idea of constantly reinforcing fealty to the state, fealty to the authorities. And that's the reason why the waving of the flag is always so important to them. You got a venue, a mass expression of democracy where all the people gather at. That's the best time. You got a captive audience. Go ahead and make sure they understand you're supposed to salute that flag. I ain't saluting a damn thing. Star Spangled Banner, to hell with your banner and to hell with you and to hell with your flag. I wouldn't even use that flag as toilet paper. Because that Star Spangled Banner anthem that you love so much, it celebrates the enslavement and dehumanization of my people. And don't give me any crap about, well, we just won't sing the second stanza. You know, if you were to take the words of Pol Pot or the words of Adolf Hitler or Chairman Mao's Little Red Book and leave out the more odious parts, I suppose you would have a respectable document made from those too. If you take out the references to Jew baiting and warmongering that Adolf Hitler did in Mein Kampf, I guess you could find a few passages in there that would sound otherwise honorable, but it doesn't make it right to teach it to people or to enshrine it in the society, now does it? You'll remember that the next time some white person tries to tell you that you should salute the flag and that the national anthem ain't as bad as all that. Just because you censor a hate tract doesn't make it right. And if that's what the best that you can do, well, we've taken some of our hate speech and censored some parts of it, that's a distinction without a difference. It is important to the society that you put some sort of mass perversion out there. Good way to make sure that you've broken the minds and the spirits of the people. Put some mass perversion out there. And then get the people to go right along with it as if it was holy writ, as if it was a virtue. When you make evil good and good evil, you have bent the very laws of reality. You have bent reality to your will. You made it where the people will think down is up and up is down simply because you told them so. And that's what validates and certifies that you are in control. Because the people have signed away their sovereignty. They've signed away any hope. They're just mindless zombies. Flag waving has never been big among black people, and there's a reason for that. In fact, it's never been big among non-whites for the most part, except when they're trying to get honorary white status. You know, like the Peter Liang travesty. Waving the flag is meant to appeal mainly to white people because the flag represents the establishment and celebration of white privilege. The United States is an ethno-state dedicated to giving white people a free ride, so no wonder their empty little hearts go pitter-pat whenever they see the flag. That's the symbol of the free ride. That's the symbol of the free lunch for white folks. Black people are the ones who are saying, you know what, that free ride's about to have a price tag. In fact, there's some back taxes that you owe. Stick 'em up, sucker, the rent's due. As Dr. King once said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Well, under white supremacy, the opposite is also true. Freedom anywhere is a threat to oppression everywhere. Defiance to white supremacy anywhere is a threat to white supremacy everywhere. And when that opposition takes place in the very heart of the evil empire, then you have a real problem. As I told you last Thursday, when the Romans occupied Britain, they had no choice but to invade Ireland as well, because if the occupied people of Britannia could see a bastion of freedom, not under Roman domination, then that would start to give them ideas as well. It certainly gave ideas to the Germans, now didn't it? And to see these clowns burning jerseys, you've had some idiots in the white media trying to say, now people are burning jerseys. Well, thanks for buying them, stupid. You think the NFL gives a damn what you do with a jersey after you spend money on it? See, this is the thing about all these white supremacists that black people need to understand. These clowns will blow off some steam, treat them like children because that's what they are, degenerate, depraved little babies. And after they throw their little temper tantrum and blow off some steam, they'll go back to what the hell they were doing. I mean, if they're not burning jerseys, they're burning crosses. And this is just their day. This is nothing special here. This is just their day. But you got to stop sitting here reacting to this crap as if it means something. Like apparently, ooh, we don't want to make the white supremacists mad. Why? If they get out of line, you got the power to smack them down. What's missing is the will to do so. That's how you know you're a slave. A slave is someone who is compelled to put their master's comfort and wishes before their own. In fact, a slave has no wishes or interests of his own. He exists solely to serve the comfort and the whims of others. Now, a man, on the other hand, he serves the whims and comfort of no one but himself. Because he has a life to live, and he intends to make the most of it. That's called humanity, personhood, having an identity. White supremacy's goal from the very jump was to force black people into a permanent underclass. But what went unsaid is that this process would require us to go along with it. Sad as it is to say, that's exactly what we did. The massive changes that you've been seeing in just 24 hours, that shouldn't be surprising to you. The potential has always been there. If we decided to stop being doormats, then the world would move. But apparently we keep waiting for white supremacy to let up on us, and they ain't gonna let up on you. You're gonna have to make the bastards back off. We've done it many times before, but what's missing is persistence. A show of rebellion like we've seen the last 48 hours, that's nice for a day or for a sports season. My question is, what comes next? Because without having a game plan, what's going to happen is we will quickly go back to the subservient posture we've been in before. As I've always told you, a boycott is only half an action, and a boycott is merely a protest aimed at attacking someone's money. A real Change is what's called for here. A boycott should simply be stopping giving your money to your enemy. Now, where's the money going to go? And it cannot go to your enemy or your enemy's friends. It has to go to you and those like you. If someone is not acting honorably towards you, you don't waste your time trying to reform them. You don't sit there hoping that they'll discover religion and act like a civilized human being. What you do is you knock the bastard down and you build institutions that operate in your interests. You don't make apologies for that. And you don't try to make other people feel comfortable about the fact that you're putting yourself first. The good old boys aren't afraid of taking a knee with us. They're not afraid of speaking a few clearly insincere words about how much they value equality and justice. I mean, they've been running that scam for 250 years now. What has to change here is the balance of power. We must have the power to punish white supremacists who attack us, not go running to some white person in the desperate hope that they're going to decide to follow the law for the first time in half a millennium. The same way that black athletes have exercised power and haven't given a damn if it displeased the dominant society, so we too must have the power to exercise punishment over those who attack us. Not take an opinion poll, not put our finger to the wind, not look over our shoulders, well, sure hope they don't mind. Nah, to hell with their feelings. And by the way, when you start exercising power over the white supremacists and start punishing them, let me go ahead and tell you what's going to happen. Even those good white liberals who claim that they're on the side of black folks, they won't be taking a knee in support for that. When you start as a black person exercising punishment over white people, when you start walking up to the arena of power and start to deal, when white people say jump and you don't respond, when your good white liberal friends give you a pat on the head and you instead slap their hand away, they're not going to appreciate that. They're going to oppose it.
I'm sorry.
It's one thing to pretend that you don't support white supremacy, but when black people start putting white supremacists in prison for their behavior, when they start showing that white privilege is going to carry a price tag and it's going to be punished, then all of a sudden you'll find even your so-called white liberal friends becoming a lot less supportive. After all, it was liberal whites who coined such imaginary phrases as reverse racism and the race card. They depend on white supremacy just like the white right does. Let that be a lesson for you. As events unfold and the NFL protest spreads as it has to Major League Baseball, and it's really going to be fun when things get to basketball. I mean, it's one thing to have a stadium where the players are hundreds of feet away from you, but in basketball, the players are at arm's length. They're right there in front of you. Yeah, when they're standing less than 5 feet away from you and they're doing that, and you got the sport that's known for being the black man's sport, when that happens there, oh my, the bad guys will truly lose what passes for their minds. And watch as they become increasingly more desperate to try to find a way to buck themselves up, because that's what they're trying to do. When you see the white right complaining about, oh, we're going to stop watching games, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep their spirits up. They've been used to so long seeing black athletes doing everything they could to curry white folks' favor. Black people being killed in the streets, and the guys who actually do have the ability to at least be seen protesting wouldn't do anything about it. That was very reassuring. Very reassuring to the dominant society. Very reassuring that, yeah, the very black men who have the least to lose, they'll stand there and just let us go ahead and slaughter black folks in the streets. But now it's not happening, and they're not sure what to do. When you threaten their paycheck, that doesn't work. Instead, it emboldens them. And when you see the protests spreading and going, how far is this going to go? That lets you know that real fear has set in. You can't threaten their paycheck, or at least if you do, they don't seem to care. You're not going to find a way to intimidate them. You're not going to shame them. You're not going to try to make them into pariahs. Instead, they're becoming paragons. and at the worst possible time. And it's the worst possible people who could be doing it. See, if white supremacy is going to be toppled, it will be straight black males who do it. There's plenty of Hispanics in Major League Baseball, but you don't see them taking a knee. You don't see them doing anything at all. And they're the ones who Trump has been aiming the gonzo guns at. They're the ones who Trump has been demonizing left, right, and center. He made it to the presidency demonizing Hispanics. But the Hispanics are schizophrenic on the idea of race. Look at Sammy Sosa, if you can. So obviously they were never going to do anything in regards to trying to protest white supremacy. They're still trying to hope that they can somehow curry the favor of the white supremacists. No, the only ones who have the steel in their spine to challenge the empire of evil is the black man. And, at least for a day, he's doing so. The question is, will he continue to? And that's where a game plan comes in. Because at some point, we got to get off that knee. As important as it is to take a knee and show we ain't going along to get along, at some point you got to stand back up again and start moving in the right direction. Whether or not the will and the agenda for exactly that kind of move exist remains to be seen. But for now, those of us in real black media take this moment and use this protest to push our agenda. It's carrying the day, and that makes it useful to us.
Oops. Okay, you done dope me.